So, hey guys, today we are talking about Nibiru. And Nibiru has without a doubt fallen off a cliff in play rate. In terms of play rate, I think just from my experience, Nibiru was around maybe 40-30%. And that was just maybe one of Nibiru or playing Nibiru at all, right? And at some point it was definitely at that play rate, but now it might be around what, like 10-5% or even less. And the reason being, of course, well, every single deck and their mother has a way to play around Nibiru, so it's not nearly as efficient. So of course, let's say we're playing Blackwing will still get obliterated by Nibiru, right? So every single thing you put on your end board can be nibbed. The only way you have to somewhat play around nib, well, you have two ways. One is Chaos Angel. So if we make Chaos Angel, none of our synchros will be affected by Nibiru. The other way is if we call by one of our opponent's cards, and then we make Disbatter early, then we're nib proof there in that case. But also, if our opponent has Nibiru, then they could just hold it the whole time until they think we're done with the combo and then drop it with chain off, and that's uncounterable if you're playing Blackwing. And then the only thing you should be able to pull out of your ass might be a Blackwing Full Armor Master, which is rough, but if you can manage it, you can manage it, right? So against generally what people would call off meta, just a bunch of off meta combo decks, Nibiru is still pretty effective, right? But they're called off meta for a reason. Their play rate is lower, so that might be 1 in 10 games you find something really outlandish or something you don't usually see, let's say maybe Memento. Not to say that Memento actually plays that poorly into Nibiru, but just in general, the fall off point for Nib is when these two archetypes were released. I believe it was Sprite and Tearlament. So yeah, Nibiru is just a useless rock against Sprite and Tearlament, right? So if we just think about it, we just normal summon Rhinoheart, and then our second summon will be Kitkelos, and then our third summon will be Rukelos. And maybe, there is a world that Rukelos could be the 4th or 5th summon, but there's realistically, in my opinion, no world where it would have been the 6th summon when we had full power tier in Master Duel with all of the Ishizu cards. So yeah, completely worthless against Tearlament. I guess you could argue Rukelos effect has to send a tier card from hand or face of field to the graveyard, I suppose. But then with Sprite, you just simply make Gigantic Sprite as 4th summon or lower, and then you can activate Gigantic Sprite, and then your opponent is not able to special summon monsters except for level, rank, link 2 monsters. So in Nibiru, not a level 2 monster, believe it or not. Even if this was a level 1 monster, that would not be summonable. Unfortunately, I guess. So yeah, just pretty damn painful to be playing Nib at this point in time. And of course, now, Nib still not that great. And a lot of new archetypes getting released all the time. And they all also play around Nib. So, Voiceless Voice. The amount of summons you do is at most, if we start with Diviner, we special summon, or not special summon, normal summon Diviner, and then we send Trias Hierarchia, and then Trias special summons itself, and then we put Diviner into the graveyard with this effect, trigger Diviner. Diviner will then allow you to special summon the low from the deck with Diviner Effect right here. And then low will trigger to grab Barrier of the Voiceless Voice. Barrier grabs Saphira. Saphira grabs you a Skull Guardian and allows you to perform a Ritual Summon. And then we Ritual Summon Skull Guardian as our, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4th summon, 5th summon low. So this is the most times you summon. Otherwise, it's just 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3. So this just inherently plays around Nib, and this is a step above like Tier 1 in the sense that before we would be done with the Rukalos somewhat, because the Rukalos would be sent to the graveyard. Well, I mean, it can still be used as like fusion material in the graveyard for tier, but that's not here or nor there. So this has an Omni Negate every single turn, essentially. So at this point, you can't even necessarily imperm Nibiru very well. That's still not that great, because if you were to imperm and then nib the Skull Guardian, you would have to imperm when they only control the Skull Guardian, because if low is controlled with a light ritual monster, you can't target this. But if you nib this triggers the prayers of the Voiceless Voice that is definitely in the graveyard to then special summon a guy. So this can special summon back a Skull Guardian, and then if a normal summon hasn't been used, we could normal summon like Ash Blossom, Jewett Spring to make Dynamundo. Dynamundo special summon Skull Guardian next turn, resummon the low. So yeah, that's not even like the best play necessarily, and the hand they would have to have is like extremely mid. But yeah, that just plays around Nib so well, dude. You're kind of just cooked. And alright, if we look at Yubel, you can just immediately make a Phantom of Yubel, and then it just plays around Nib, and it's extremely quick to do so. So the line is like, we have Phantom of Yubel, and we can make this with just the in the normal summon D Lotus line. So it's like normal summon D Lotus, special summon Spirit of Yubel for second summon, and then this allows you to grab the Nightmare Pain. Pain pops Spirit of Yubel, and then this allows you to summon the Yubel. So we're at, let's see, 1, 2, and then with Yubel 3, and then here we can shuffle back. Well, if we have any Yubel monsters in the hand, we can shuffle that back, and that'll be fine to make a Phantom of Yubel. But if not, we just carry on. So we have Nightmare Pain now and Gruesome Grave Squirmer. So Gruesome Grave Squirmer special summons to pop the spirit, or not spirit, to pop Yubel to summon Yubel Terror Incarnate. And then here's your last chance to nib. But Grave Squirmer effect has yet to activate. Phantom of Yubel has yet to be summoned. So that's not really great. You kind of just remove 2 guys from the field. But there's still like plays you can do after this point, so not great. Not great at all. And I believe you cannot shuffle back the Spirit of Yubel here, I think. But maybe you can, and I could be wrong about that. And maybe you can just bring back the Yubel with the Gruesome Grave Squirmer. Let's see where the summon's from. Hand deck or graveyard? Yeah, it seems you could shuffle back the Spirit of Yubel here. And then you have the Yubel in the graveyard, which you can bring back, and you can link off the Terror Incarnate. So if you do that, I believe that probably will play around Nib then. But you would prefer not to do this because you'd rather have Spirit of Yubel in the graveyard. So, yeah, it's a bit situational. But, yeah, you definitely have ways to play around Nib. And if we go to like Super Heavy Samurai, their line immediately while they're doing their searches just summons a Baron. So yeah, that plays around Nibiru. And what else? What else do we have? So with Mathmech, they can't do it anymore, not as consistently, but with Mathmech, what you could do is you just simply have diameter in hand, and then you just make the alum version using the diameter, and then you just have like an Omni Negate with the alum version on your field. Well, until I guess you end your turn. This is only like an Omni Negate for one turn, but then you can use the effective Super Factorial to do this again. But yeah, point is, Nibiru, just like every deck in their mother now just has a way to like counter Nibiru, and obviously this just says that Nibiru is clearly a mistake card. Like that's kind of how it feels, because it's a bit too oppressive. Like there's still like a lot of older decks, I suppose, that can't deal with Nib at all, and Nib is kind of just total BS, because I could have like 3 engine cards and still have no play against Nibiru. I could have 5 engine cards and still nothing I can do about Nibiru, like in Salamangreat, which gets completely, I guess, rocked by Nibiru, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, this effect, pretty disgusting. Just tribute your entire board and give you like a useless token that has no protection or anything, so you can just immediately remove it. Yeah, that's not exactly what I would call fun. But just in general, more and more new archetypes are just being built in with anti-Nib attributes or elements to them that make them not really Nibiruable, to the point where Nibiru is actually becoming like a liability if you were playing it, right, against these decks, because you're not even trading for anything anymore. Your Nibiru is just stuck in the hand, and you can't even trade one negate off of this. Like, I mean, if your opponent were to make like an early Apollosa or something, then at least, you know, your opponent would have to use one of the activations on the Nibiru, you know, and go neg 800 on the Apollosa. But like against Sprite, you just have no window to activate this even. And then against Voiceless Voice, the Omni Negate is just soft once per turn on this, you know, unlike Baron. So yeah, that's actually a little bit worse to deal with. Rukalos does summon itself back, but that's only if they send Rukalos to begin with. But assuming Rukalos is sent, they still can do this again with Rukalos, and then they can shuffle back Rukalos, special summon Rukalos again. But I mean, that's still technically a little bit worse than just resolving a Gigantic Sprite. So there is that, I guess. And having like bad consistency, I guess, with like Nib, right? Where sometimes you might be able to activate Nib at all. Sometimes it's worthless. Sometimes it's just a do nothing card. Doesn't even trade like a negate. And then sometimes it's completely unplayable for your opponent. Like with Dragon Link, there is no way to efficiently deal with Nib. So the only card you have that can actually negate Nib is Borreload Savage, but you know what's especially hilarious about this? Borreload Savage doesn't have Omni Negates till it resolves this effect here. So if you chain Nibiru to that effect of Borreload Savage, you just wipe your opponent's entire field, and there's nothing that can be done about this. The only other card that is able to negate the Nibiru is if you have Dispatter plus Called By, but also Nibiru, if we're talking about just generic cards in hand, like Called By and stuff, there are like no cards that deal with Nibiru except for one of Crossout. If you have a Crossout Designator and also play Nib, which we just discussed is like not that good of a card, then yeah, if you open that one of, and also I guess worth mentioning is you also have to have the Nibiru in deck, so if it's in hand, this wouldn't work, but if we have the Nibiru, or we get hit by the Nibiru and have the cross out, that's the only play we have. If we have like Called by Gamma, none of those cards will be stopping Nibiru. Well, I guess Gamma can technically do it if you make the Link 2, which would be an insane bluff, I guess, with the Lambda, right? Yeah. You could technically Lambda to Gamma negate the Nibiru, I guess, but that's just not that great in my opinion. But you know what? Lambda plus Gamma is fine because we can use it as technically part of our end board next turn. But yeah, you have to hard open 2 of Gamma to make this work, so a bit rough in that department. And let's see. Yeah, if I were to list all of the decks that benefit off of all of these decks that exist currently that can deal with the Nib, it's pretty nice actually that we don't have a side deck, because if you could side deck in like a Nib, there are a lot of decks that just can't deal with Nib like at all, right? So if you were to want to generically deal with Nib, you don't have to like jump through hoops and hurdles to do that anymore because of the game state. So I mean, overall, I think this is a positive change, but yeah, without a doubt, Nibiru has fallen off, and Nibiru, in my opinion, has always felt somewhat toxic. Just when it was being played, like a lot, right? So if I take the Nibiru line, right, the line that plays around Nibiru, I have like no negates, and I probably don't have Nibiru in hand. Well, we'll just assume that. And my opponent, they can just do whatever, and there's a good chance I probably can't stop what they do, because I'm not playing around Nibiru, and I only did like 4 summons. But if I do the line that plays into Nib, then even if I currently have like 10 different like interactions, like they don't even have to be super good interactions. Maybe it's like something basic like change a guy to defense position. There's a few of them, but let's go with like 5 interactions or so. Nibiru can reduce the amount of interactions I have to 0. So yeah, but we're gambling on if they have Nibiru, but there's no real way to tell if your opponent has Nibiru until you summon like 5 times. So technically, as well, I mean, we know the play rate, right? But theoretically, until you've summoned 5 times, there is no trigger or anything for you to know your opponent has Nibiru. So yeah, if your opponent does no actions and then drops a Nib on you immediately when they're able to, that hurts still a lot of decks, just not like the ones that are super played for the most part right now. For example, though, even Kashtira has a decent time playing around Nib, simply because like, well, yeah, you just make a Rise Art pass, which is like pretty sufficient to beat a lot of decks. And this is also better in the mirror, so no real point of actually resolving Shangri-Ira in my opinion. But okay. Nibiru. If I need to think of a single deck that this beats, I would struggle. So let's check real quick. So if I check Master Duel meta, I guess, we'll check if a single one of these top decks can, I guess, or yeah, any of these archetypes, if they actually get affected by Nibiru. So Tenpai Dragon. Well, with the field spell, no. You're not really able to do anything against that. And then we have Yubel. Yubel, yeah, we discussed Yubel, that's not happening. So Tenpai Dragon does like a lot of their summoning in the battle phase anyways, which you can't activate Nib during. Snake Eye Fire King. Snake Eye Fire King, I think, actually is possible to Nib. but like they can have follow-up to Nib as well, depending on like how they built it. But there's Arvata. I suppose if they have Arvata on the field, you can't really nib them, so I guess it's situational if you can nib them or not. Ritual Beasts, I'm actually not sure enough about Ritual Beasts, but I think Ritual Beasts should be possible to nib, but it's actually not that great because they have Nochi Drago, I think, which means if we try to nib them too early, they can make this. But from what I know about Ritual Beasts, I think they are pretty nibbable when I look at their inboard and their setup. If you just wait on your nib, I think there is an optimal point to nib Ritual Beasts, and that will completely cook them, right? I think that's probably right around when they summon like Colossus, Protoss, or Escudos. Around that point, we can nib before they activate anything, and that should just cook Ritual Beast. So, yeah, that's how that works, I guess. And then with Rescue Ace, I'm not even sure if that deck summons like necessarily 5 times. I mean, yeah, I don't think Nib is that great against that list, because if they are able to resolve, I guess, the Turbulence, then it doesn't matter, right? If Turbulence is resolved, then they're done. They don't need to summon anymore, but even if they do, they're probably just making an SP. So yeah, that works out, I guess. Rika. I think that's dependent on the hand they have, but they can deal with Nib actually. So we have the Princess. So I believe this can be set up. Princess. So this negates a monster effect, so that can just negate Nib from like the graveyard, which is pretty strong in its own way. And then there's Voiceless Voice, Math Mech, and they can somewhat deal with Nib, I guess, right? So yeah, I honestly just like I just hate Nib, to be honest. Like, feels a bit unfair, like what Nib does, because like if we look at Ash Blossom Geospring, it discards itself to the graveyard, so you can hit it with Called By. With Imperm, we can play around Imperm with a few different things. Like we could do a Book of Moon. We have more cards that play around like Imperm now, so like Kirin, Shervara, whatever. All of those cards can kind of let you play around Imperm a bit. But then like Nib, our counterplay to Nib is we need an early monster negate, which kind of like pisses me off a bit, I guess. But yeah, we pretty much need some like powerful type of effect to deal with Nibiru immediately, which means, you know, decks will need that type of thing, and that type of thing works on other things as well, which gives me a very strong mixed feelings, I guess. But I mean, could Nibiru become prominent again? I hope not. That's all I can say about that. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. And yeah, hopefully never see another Nibiru again, because yeah, I just don't like Nib. So I guess Nibiru is still like decent if you draw it off of Max E, and I guess you could still run it for that, you know, because it's a very real situation that comes up when your opponent's trying to like deck you out or something, or maybe OTK you. Drawing the Nib off of the Maxi with like an Imperm is still killer. So I guess you still have Nibiru in, well, yeah, you still want a Nibiru in situations like that. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.